Who needs who more?
Electorally, no, I don't think they can replace Bersatu.
Parties come together or they form alliances all because of election.
If we're talking about Johor, it's really a Barisan versus Pakatan situation.
We need new blood. We need young people to
But
rise
young
up.
people who is very familiar and very understanding of what it means to govern a nation. Hello everyone, welcome to yet another episode of Beyond the Headlines, the go-to space for the top stories that made the headlines and more. I'm Amalina Kamal.
And I'm Alina Koshi.
Now today in Malaysian politics, we open with a very familiar scene, right? Alliances shifting, loyalties tested, and the unraveling of political partnerships that were once thought solid.
I mean, let's face it, politics is just like relationships. Okay, so we're kicking things off with what can only be known as the latest episode of political breakups. So as in any relationship, we start with the wooing and the courtship and, falling in love and, getting together, having the same objectives, working together. It's all happy and, things are working well. And then there's turbulence. And then there's recalibration. And then what, people might term it, in polite terms as complicated. In your Facebook, if they say, what's your relationship status and what would you say? It's complicated.
It's interesting you say that, Lena, because of course, a lot of people are also questioning whether or not this is actually stable ahead of our upcoming polls, Johor and Malacca, right? Because as it is right now, the headline development that we've been seeing, this particular breakup storyline is focusing at the moment on the Perikatan Nasional umbrella, right? Obviously, after PAS has explicitly voiced out that it is ending its political cooperation with Bersatu. Now, in some circles, this particular moment is a moment that they saw coming. However, we cannot underplay it because when you say complicated, it's quite easy to say a situation that cannot be explained as complicated. But it's not just a case of one party not necessarily agreeing with others. It's actually a party saying that they're open to work with or at least hook up with other parties that may help them push further among the voters.
Right.
Moving forward, right? And in this particular case, right, PAS has also, for some reason, said that although it doesn't want to work together politically with Bersatu, they're okay with still being under the Perikatan Nasional umbrella. Because we have to also understand, within the umbrella itself, there's two other parties, Gerakan and MIPP, the Malaysian Indian People's Party, right?
I mean, let's look at it this way. It's like watching a soap opera, and you know what? We don't have popcorn, but we are Malaysian, so we have our keropok. So this is what we're doing while discussing this. We're slowly eating our keropok because it gets really interesting as time goes by. There's hookups, breakups, makeups. And let's face it, inside Bersatu also all is not really well because there are reports of internal disagreements with MPs aligning to, Hamza Zainuddin, the one behind Reset, questioning the party's direction and whether staying in the current opposition setup is it a long-term advantage or otherwise?
Right. And
wow.
A long-term advantage or otherwise, right? That's yet to be seen lah. But of course, since we're already talking about splinter politics as it is, and in the last episode we talked about, smaller parties like Bersama having to revive itself, trying to enter the conversation and having to, position themselves as an alternative for voters. We cannot, run away from saying that the environment itself is already fragmented as it is. And to what extent are we able to, or at least Malaysians are able to support this when it comes to governance?
And speaking of Malaysians, right, I think we're all pretty tired. It's like watching a tennis game and, you're swiveling to the left, swiveling to the right and seeing whether somebody got the ball or somebody dropped the ball, or who's swinging, who's hitting, who's winning, who's losing. So it's crazy. And we also seen so many things happen. We had resignations, ongoing rumors of political reshuffling, and of course I mean, let's face it, the ever present backdrop of the current economic pressure, subsidy rationalization, rising cost of living, all of which are shaping voter sentiment heading into the next electoral battle.
Yes. So right now we're unraveling all of that, unpacking all of that, this political situationship that we've laid out. And of course, here on set with us, we have political analyst associate professor Dr. Shaza Shukri. Welcome to the show,
Thank you
Professor.
for having me.
Thank you so much. And every time we talk about past, on top of my mind, it's like, okay, we got to call Prof. Shaza because you can, I suppose, explain the discourse of what the considerations are, especially behind the party, right?
I mean, yes, and we've got to begin with the bigger story. How significant is PAS ending its political cooperation with Bersatu, and what does it mean for the future of Perikatan Nasional? I mean, are we going to see an unhappy marriage, with us, looking at unhappy parents refusing to work with each other,
Right.
So what's the story here?
Oh, what's the story there? I wish I know all the entire story myself, right? I wish all of us. But I think I'll start by a point that I think Amrina made that for some people we've kind of foresee this because this has been months in the making, to be honest, right? It all began during Bersatu's convention, I guess, last year, during their general meeting. And we had Hamzah versus Muhyiddin and all of that instability. And then we had Muhyiddin resigning on 1st January from the Perikatan chairmanship. And then it took them a month plus for them to come up with a brand new chairman for Perikatan. So my point is that this instability, this unhappiness between the two sides, the two parties, have been going on for months. We have the feeling, or we kind of know that PAS is not too happy with Muhyiddin's leadership of Bersatu. Rumors of PAS preferring Hamzah, and for someone like me, I was just waiting for the announcement, right? It's more of a when, then, and if. We know it's going to happen. But the more interesting question that you ask, Rana, is that what happens to Perikatan now? Because the language is very vague, where ending political cooperation. What does that mean, right? So they're saying ending formal cooperation, formal working with Bersatu. But then you're still working together in different states, from Perlis, Kedah. So again, what does that mean, right? Perikatan is still there. And I think both sides have made the comment that they want to stay in Perikatan.
Right.
How does that work?
Okay, but also, Prof, do you think, are you actually seeing this being a primarily disagreement when it comes to like seat allocations then? I mean, how would the election strategy go moving forward? Because we understand that within the coalition's constitution itself, if let's say they want to remove, a party cannot be removed based on unilateral decision, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, if you want to contest under the Perikatan Nasional umbrella, but you are voicing out this sort of dissatisfaction or like not being able to cooperate, you still need to get a signature from the Perikatan Nasional chairman. But we know for a fact that the chairman at the moment right now is PAS.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So does that actually make them the kingmaker in that sense?
So for the past few years that Perikatan has been there, it's very interesting that PAS is the bigger, the more dominant party, but Tan Sri Muhyiddin was the chair. But now I think it's more straightforward. We have a PAS vice president as the chair of Perikatan Nasional. So without a doubt that Perikatan Nasional is a PAS-led, PAS-dominated coalition right now. But this question about which banner they're going to vote, they're going to contest under, I think I saw yesterday or a few days before that they made a statement in Johor that PAS is going to contest under PAS, the PAS banner. So for PAS, maybe it's more straightforward. But I guess your question is more Bersatu, right? If Bersatu wants to compete under Perikatan, how would they go about that? So that would be complicated. I think they need to figure that out in their Supreme Council, right? They have that Majlis Tertinggi. That's where they always make a decision, whereby they always say they come to a decision in a consensus. Maybe they can vote on it, but I'm not sure. So if they do vote on it, on Bersatu's position in Perikatan, people's eyeballs will be on MIPP and Gerakan.
Right.
Who
Yeah,
would they
no,
choose to be
I
with,
do agree.
Yeah,
right?
and also because they have benefited before PAS and Bersatu because it's like a consolidation, right? Because you want the Malay Muslim support under one political umbrella. So now it feels like what happens when this doesn't work anymore? Because initially it was, under one umbrella you can garner that. So what does that now look like for Bersatu?
Yeah, you're right. So that's why this relationship worked for so long, because we know that PAS will get the more so-called Islamist voters, right? Bersatu will get more the nationalists, and sometimes they call themselves the moderate Malay voters. So by working together, nice, they can expand their reach, right? But now with this breakup, then it would cut on their voter base. But my argument has always been Bersatu will be the one that will lose most. From this, because PAS support has always been stable. In fact, I've even argued that where PAS dominate or Perikatan dominated in the 4 states up north in the peninsula, they are mostly PAS voters with PAS, right?
Right. But the bigger question here, I think it applies to anywhere lah. How would this affect the scenario when Malay Muslim votes or the consolidation here breaks?
For the Muslim voters,
Malay Muslim.
right. So it's not just PAS and Bersatu. So they have to consider UMNO as well. Maybe Amanah, but maybe you can forget about Amanah for now. So now the Malay Muslim voters have 3 options. So the Islamist PAS or the so-called moderate Bersatu. What Bersatu offers is more leadership in a way. It's more like an elite brand party. You have Tan Sri Muhyiddin, a former prime minister. But then you also have UMNO with its long history. Not perfect, but it has proven itself as government.
Yeah.
So now it has fragmented Malay Muslim voters. So this is why we say that actually our GEs have always been about capturing the Malay voters, because they are so fragmented. Who can you get? Which party can get more Malay votes? Because for Pakatan, I think it's more straightforward. But for the Malays, if this is the situation, it may not be good for any of them. But I would say that, again, Bersatu is the one that would lose more. Maybe PAS could survive, UMNO could survive.
So we see this as macam PAS having a bigger bargaining chip here.
I would say so.
And then obviously this is probably for the opposition bloc, it's not necessarily the best move, because you have, again, the Johor polls coming up, right? And then you have this question of like, okay, this particular party is going to contest under its own banner or a coalition banner and all that. But we move on to the question of who needs who more, right? Still on PAS, how important do you think PAS's machinery is in capturing voters?
I think it's very important. I mean, people have always said that is PAS's biggest strength. But beyond the machinery, of course, another of PAS's strength is its ideology. Those who support PAS truly believes in the party and what it stands for, its vision. The machinery is there to support that. The idea is still there. I think this is PAS's biggest strength if you compare to other parties.
Just an observation, maybe. You were saying that, because they have that strength in gaining Malay Muslim voters, especially those from the rural side. But again, perhaps being in Bersatu was also a move to sort of attract the non-Muslim voters as well, because you still do need some support from that category. So now when you look at it, because now they are not they're in a situationship where things are not working out. So how does that reflect on their efforts in attracting that segment of voters?
I think PAS is still trying their best. I think that's why they would like to keep Gerakan and MIPP on their side, even though a lot of analysts have argued the value add of these two parties are, not that much, consider all things. But from there, we see that PAS understands that it needs the non-Malay votes beyond just the Malay moderates. They also need the non-Malay votes. But I think PAS's strategy for now is not getting those Malay votes. Those non-Malay votes. It's more about So which party, which coalition they can work with later if they need to form a government?
Earlier I mentioned about the machinery aspect, right? The machinery aspect here is obviously when it comes to the logistics and the planning,
Right.
the mobilization of the campaigns before you go to the ballot box, right? So we know for a fact that PAS, like any other party, they have like their campaign trails, but PAS has this very unique sort of factor, or at least element in their how they campaign, because again, outside of the show, we talked about how they're very close to the grassroots. And when we talk about how they're very close to the grassroots, it's not like an over sort of, selling it, over compensating the party, because literally from your child is born, they're there. And usually in a household, if you're like a PAS, or if your parents are like a PAS supporter, probably, most likely, your child will also be ingrained to follow the same political inclination. Maybe probably later on, then they decide. As opposed to any other political party, it's more democratically, not imposed, but like dawn on you. You get me? It's about with the past grassroots sort of mobility, you have the education, the preschool, the healthcare, everything lah. Even the extracurricular stuff that you do outside, like the community gatherings and all that. So it's very impressive.
But I think, yes, they have been very consistent in that fact, in touching base with the grassroots communities, as opposed to maybe a different political party where they only come in when
Elections
elections
come.
draw
Yes.
near. So,
Correct, yeah.
yeah. So that is something
Difficult
that advantage.
to penetrate lah for
Yeah.
others.
I mean, that's the comments that I get all the time as well. When people say that, you compare with other parties, just like you said, they come, every 5 years, there you see them. But with PAS, they're a consistent presence in the kampung. They're always there. I've heard stories of, former Perikatan voters, in fact, in Selangor that have shifted support PAS. When we ask why, because they say because PAS is there when they need assistance. The beras would show themselves. The assistance is always immediate from PAS. No question asked. Some comments that I get on other parties is like there are a lot of bureaucracies involved because you want to be transparent and whatnot. But with PAS, it's immediate, so that gets people's attention. To be honest.
I know we talked about who loses more in the particular split, right? But I'm just want to still ask this particular question, right? In the opposition bloc's split here, let's say, who stands to lose more among the 4 party members here within the coalition?
Among the 4, that's interesting because usually we talk about PAS and Bersatu, right?
Yeah, but you cannot disregard the other 2. You know, Gerakan and MIPP. MIPP being just joined the coalition.
That's an interesting question. Who would lose most? Perhaps are those 2, Gerakan and MIPP, because they are banking on the strength of the 2 bigger parties.
They are like children in a family of 2 warring parents lah.
And now they have to choose sides.
They have to choose sides. It's like a divorce.
Oh my God, yeah, no.
Children of divorce.
Children of separation, but nothing seems to be what it is. Okay, Prof, let's go straight away in addressing the upcoming Johor polls here, right? Because earlier in the intro, I did also briefly mention about how like we have splinter parties like Bersama and everything. Do you think smaller parties can also replace Bersatu in Johor Pact?
Oh, the smaller parties that PAS want to work with?
Yes.
No, unfortunately, no.
To replace Bersatu?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean,
Okay, why?
yeah. They are smaller parties. I believe they are talking about Pejuang, Iman, Berjasa. All of these are parties that are there, but they don't really provide, or they don't have the electoral strength, right? These are parties that will be difficult to win in an election. The best that these parties can give is that kind of symbolic unity of the Malays, the Ummah, right? Because that's what PAS always talk about. We want to bring all these parties together under one Malay-Muslim banner. So it's more symbolic, I think. But electorally, no, I don't think they can replace Bersatu.
It's a question of electoral weight lah.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
but I mean, speaking of symbolic, right? Because how much does the use of separate party logos and identities affect voter perception? Because, particularly when compared to a more, unified coalition approach, because when you're, going under one banner, it looks more solid, right? So when you're going under a separate party logo and identity, then you're again, starting from scratch.
Yeah. But I would counter that by saying, in a way, it's a smart move on PAS's point because people know PAS more. I mean, if we think about it in 2022, in Kelantan and Terengganu, not just PAS, even Bersatu candidates compete under PAS's logo and PAS's banner. So it shows that there's that affinity that people have with PAS, and PAS understands that maybe that's what they want to push, that we are truly about PAS, we're no longer about Perikatan, and perhaps they know that's what their voters want. We want a PAS, led government as opposed to an unstable Perikatan.
But what about having to say that actually whatever is transpiring within the Perikatan Nasional bloc, right, is actually an advantage to Barisan Nasional?
Yeah.
Well, how do I put this? In Johor, we're
Yes,
talking
in
about in Johor. Yes, if we're talking about Johor, because BN is already dominating. To be honest, we're not looking so much at Perikatan in the sense that their seats in Johor are, I think 3 in the States, a couple more in the parliament. So it's not really a big challenge to Barisan Nasional. I think if we're talking about Johor, it's really a Barisan versus Pakatan situation. If anything, this split could even help Pakatan, to be honest, because like we were talking earlier, the Malay votes might be split between PAS, Bersatu and BN. So the one that could benefit from that is perhaps Pakatan Harapan.
Realistically also, the opposition in this particular case, Perikatan Nasional, whoever's under it lah, PAS ke, Bersatu ke, will see a struggle in defending their seat. I mean, in this case, Bersatu will see a struggle lah because of the current situationship they're in.
Yes, I believe Bersatu. I mean, Bersatu has more opportunities perhaps in Johor because of the figure of Tan Sri Muhyiddin. But again, because his popularity has waned. So that's why we're thinking it could affect his position, thus Bersatu's position, even in Johor. So that's what we're looking at for now.
Okay, Prof. One thing, Johor is more competitive and fragmented in terms of the makeup, right? But then, okay, the current scenario also that we're looking at is, earlier we talked about Malacca, but let's just go up a little bit. Negeri Sembilan, for instance. Do you think the risk is higher there? Like, because Negeri Sembilan tends to be also more stable and issue-driven as opposed to party politics, as opposed... we're talking about this not necessarily within the context of the upcoming polls, but eventually GE16 is going to happen, right?
All right. Interestingly, Negeri Sembilan, if I'm just looking at the 2023 data, that's the last state elections, the competition between PN and BN is very close. In Malay majority seats, I counted about 14 where the majority is very slim between Perikatan and Barisan Nasional. So I believe that this is where it's going to be very competitive between those two, whereby we're talking about PAS's influence have reached to the southern part of Peninsular Malaysia. So they've made a lot of inroads in Selangor. So now we're watching maybe PAS could get more seats in Negeri. But all of this is, to be honest, is much, much more complicated because we know in 2023 it was a unity coalition between BN and PH. But now it's going to be it's going to be multi-corner votes in Negeri. So it's a bit more complicated. Yeah.
And also 2022 is also fresh after the whole after the Sheraton move and the whole realignment of having to draw back the trust of voters and things like that. Without bypassing the what's legally accurate or can be done, right? In this particular context, right, before we go into the political realignment nationally, still on state level, because just now having to describe Johor's voter demographic atau dari segi the environment for it, and then we talked about Negeri Sembilan as a reference point for another state election. Melaka pula, how is it?
Oh, that's also a bit more complicated, right? Because again, our data point was 2021 and then 2022. In 2022, the parliamentary seat is split between Pakatan and Perikatan. But there, again, just like Johor, when we talk about Perikatan in Melaka, we're really talking about Bersatu, Mas Amriyati. She's the one that's very influential in Melaka. But like you guys were talking about earlier, Mas, we know, is with Hamzah's camp.
Yes.
So if she moves and goes to the reset, whatever the new party is going to be, that's going to be announced soon, then it's going to be BN and PAS and Pakatan. And I don't think PAS has made enough inroads in Malacca yet.
Okay. What? Okay. But that is purely on what personalities lah.
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Not necessarily about the parties themselves, rah.
They've made some inroads, but I'm not sure if they're strong enough to challenge Barisan.
But personality and party, because some is based on the personalities that are there. Some is of course the strength of the party. Now these two things often are featured during elections, right? So what do you think between personality and party? Who has a better chance of gaining the trust of voters?
Ahead of G16 here lah.
Yeah, ahead of G16.
If you ask me, I would say parties. The reason I say this is because looking at average Malaysian voters, we're not talking about those who, watch your podcast and, follow the news. Average Malaysian voters don't really know the candidates. Yeah, they know the big names, but when they go to vote, most of the time, it's a party that they're familiar with. Just like what you mentioned, that most of us are socialized to certain parties when we were growing up. So they know the parties. When they go to vote, it's about which parties they're comfortable with because of the ideology and whatnot that we talk about.
It's also what you're trying to say is like the average Malaysian voter who's not necessarily a member of any party in question lah. Basically, they just look at it from the external punya understand like that.
And just like people who are not, who don't follow politics closely.
Correct. Dia tak jaga tepi kain, who says what when, who's out, who's not, who's in. Gitu. Understood. Okay, Prof. Now we go into political realignment, as I mentioned. PAS and UMNO sort of informal discussions that we've been hearing here. I mean, do you think that this is a reality or it's more of
like a tactical move, before the elections? I mean,
to just macam confuse the people, and then, but actually it's the other way around. They're not going to be forming an alliance or whatever.
This is part of the political soap opera in Malaysia, right?
This is a proposal
that we need to. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Strategically, it makes sense for PAS to work with UMNO strategically because UMNO is like the big brother of Bersatu, right? It's literally Bersatu 1.0. So if PAS is thinking about getting those non-Islamist votes that I mentioned earlier, then they're going to work with UMNO. But the bigger problem with these two, which happened when they had Muafakat Nasional, was once they start to work together, what's the leadership dynamic? Who's gonna, take the wheel? What's the vision here? Where's the direction they're going? So that already happened in 2021, 2022. So I think they're avoiding that because they know people are already talking about that. It's not going to work because of all of this. But electorally, or going into elections, it actually makes a lot of sense. So they will get all of or most of the Malay votes, and then figure out the other parties that are going to join them.
Because I sometimes feel that parties come together or they form alliances all because of election, not because they can work together or whether they have a long-term solution ahead to form a government that is going to bring Malaysia to the next level. So it's basically just to win the elections. Whether we can work together, that one we'll talk lain cerita.
Exactly.
Meaning to say, to simplify it further, traditional rivalries even is less important because the electoral sort of survivalness ni is more needed.
Yeah.
But then you have to also ask yourself, I think we've addressed this as well in the past episodes, right? Like post-election, we see, the votes, being counted, the votes being counted, and then we see the results, and then obviously we don't want another hung parliament lah. But for you to not have another hung parliament is also quite tough because you need to already know the coalitions beforehand. The only reason why we had to deal with that in the past elections because we don't know who's going to work with who.
Exactly.
And that's very taxing, at least when it comes to voter. And I want to go into that, voter fatigue here. Because, honestly, right, Prof, you're a voter. I myself am a voter. I don't know if you're a voter, but if you're not a voter, maybe you should because this is your future, because every time you vote is 5 years, one term, right? Okay, when it comes to voter fatigue, how important is it to address like the needs of the rakyat, as you mentioned, because we're dealing with economic pressures. And then this present administration having been to introduce the subsidy rationalisation to also help keep us afloat during external economic pressures is also another thing. But if there is another political turmoil, and it's not so far away, it's like literally next year.
Yeah.
How are we going to continue the legacy or the comfort that we're experiencing here today?
The people, voters, like you said, Malaysians in general, we want stability because we're looking long term, right? We're talking about even businesses, they're looking for long term investment opportunities in Malaysia. So we want a stable government. That's on one hand. But just like we've talked about, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I'm not sure, Malaysian politics now is fragmented. We can't avoid, there's no other way around it. So the stability that we are looking for, it depends on these parties understanding that we are fragmented, but still finding a way to work together. I think that's my key takeaway, because the problem is just like you mentioned that all of these parties are thinking of short-term survivability. Okay, I want today, I want to be in government, and that's it. But if they're really serious about, okay, what's best for the people, but for our comfort, like you mentioned, then let's try our best to work together. I think BN and PH had a good few years of trying to work together, but again, then politics come into play and it becomes another thing.
They had a good marriage while it
For a
worked.
while, yes.
But then, sometimes it feels as though, as a voter, it feels as though when you vote for a particular party or a particular coalition, it doesn't mean that that coalition is going to be there after the elections. Because in a few months, things can change, or even in a few weeks, things can change. And I think that is the exact thing I think people are facing today. They're just tired because it's not what you get, it's what happens after you vote. So things are not so, because people form coalitions because of wanting to gain a seat, right? They don't form coalition to think long term and to think that we are going to work together till death do us part, marriage till death do us part, but it doesn't happen that way. So
Okay.
what are your thoughts on that actually?
Right. If you ask me, there are two ways to look at it. On one hand, I think that is very much okay and possible if we start to understand and practice the word compromise. And I talk about this in my class all the time. Like, like I said earlier, like we understand there are a few coalitions right now with their own different ideologies and whatnot. Okay, once you get after the election and you want to figure out who you want to work with, and after you figured out your partners, well, try your best to compromise. But unfortunately, in politics today, compromise is a dirty word. No one wants to compromise. No one wants to. You say that you have your party and this is what my party is for, so I'm not going to compromise with you. And the worst thing is, that's also how the voters feel, or the strong base lah. That's how they always feel, that, no, I'm not going to compromise with your party. Then we're not going to move forward.
Basically, a simple sort of like explanation or at least example here would be like having to throw out like, I mean, even in the current present administration, like a lot of the PKR sort of reformasi, penyokong tegar is saying that not just PKR, now the Pakatan Harapan's like wishes in the manifesto is being realised when it comes to reforms. And then the example is like you have a split when it comes to the internal dynamics through a splinter party punya emergence here.
Yes. That's what happened. How do I put this? When I say compromise, it doesn't mean that you forgo all of your principles, right? That's another thing altogether. We have our principles, we stick to them. But where you can find the middle ground, why not? But the thing is, even the middle ground has become, no one wants to go there. Everyone wants to stick to their end of the spectrum. And that's why we say that Malaysia is polarized these days politically. Politically, it seems that we're polarized. So I don't know how to move forward unless we start to change things.
But do you think the big political parties, right? And it's always been, in history, it's always been a BN, well, in recent years, it was Bersatu, coalitions and PAS and all these old
Nasional,
political parties.
Perikatan.
Now with the emergence of newer parties like, Bersama.
It's an old party but revived.
Old party but revived. I don't know. Maybe there's some
new
young blood in
personalities.
it.
Yes.
But what I'm trying to say is would those parties eventually, like, with the emergence of these, and I know it kind of split votes and things like that, but do you think it would make a difference long term?
I think it could. but it's a long game. I think I mentioned this to YB Nik Nazmi himself. As I said, that if you guys are playing the long game, it's possible that don't expect Bersama to change the electoral map in 2026 or 27, but if you're really there to educate the people and to really talk with them, have an open discourse, who knows, 10 years from now, they could be the major party. Because I always remind people that, don't forget, PKR also started as this struggling party. In 2004, PKR only had one seat with Dr. Wan Azizah. And now they have a PM. We have
Who
our
is
PM is
from
from
that
PKR.
party, yes,
So
yes,
it's
yes.
definitely possible for Bersama to reach that point.
It's just a time and a lot of good strategic moves and alliances lah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need some new kids on the block.
Definitely.
I think that's also
Definitely.
another sentiment that a lot of us are. I mean, even the older ones, like the ones who are older than us, are also looking at. We just need new, fresh faces.
Yes, we need new blood. We need young people to
But
rise
young
up
people
and-
who is very familiar and very understanding of what it means to govern a nation.
But that's the thing, they need experience there, right? So for these young new politicians to gain experience, the parties need to make way. Are the parties making way, or they're
Right.
still keeping the
They're
old?
holding
Unfortunately,
on.
still
It's
men.
like a-
The
you
old
know,
guards are
are
they
still
still
there.
there?
The old guards refuse. They just want to stay as long as they can.
Exactly. So you don't give the opportunity to the
Yeah.
young, and then we say, "Oh, there's no young blood that's capable." How are they going to be capable if you don't give
Don't
them the
gaslight
opportunity?
them that way.
Don't
lah.
gaslight
Yeah.
them and don't throw them out to the wolves, lah. I mean,
Right.
give them a chance.
Prof,
Exactly.
because we have come to the end of the discussion, but we want to leave you with two questions. I'm going to take the first one, right? Biggest challenges to the opposition having to move ahead of this GE16 here.
Their biggest challenge, I guess, is figuring out their partners. I mean, they are very clear on, in a way, they're clear on, okay, their base are the Malay Muslim voters. Then who are they going to work with, and how are they going to move forward with that? I think it's more strategy when it comes to the opposition, because it's very difficult to imagine them growing their base on their own. So who are they going to work with? Is that going to compromise them and their position and their
Ideals.
ideals among their voters as well? So it's a lot for them to think of.
And on the other side, what is the biggest challenge facing the government if it wants to maintain public confidence and amid economic pressures and, shifting political dynamics?
You know, when it comes to the government, which is, of course, the incumbent, we're looking for stability. You know, we always expect the government to exude a kind of stability that we can have confidence in. But right now, that's what's missing, right? When we look at the government, it looks in disarray, not just the economy, the political part. Socially as well, I feel like almost every month there's something in the news. So it doesn't, people want to feel or want to believe in the government, but they don't get that right now. So it's about winning back the people's trust, showing the people that they are deserving of a second term. And you show that with policies, because you are in government. You can't play the opposition narrative. You're not. You're in government. So show what you have done and show what you can do.
Well, Elena, I think with whatever Prof has mentioned, right? I think in politics, it's similarly with what relationships are, right? It doesn't necessarily begin with just a breakup. You have to look and factor in the consequences after that. And unfortunately, because this particular consequence is like what? Like our elections are coming like in the next few months. I believe so.
No, but it is a breakup because, when you break up with somebody, you have to determine whose friends belong to who, right? His friends is his friends and my friends are my friends, or his friends became my friends, those kind of things. It's quite similar in this aspect as well. I mean, the alliances that you form, the loyalties that that you have, all this come into play whenever there's a breakup involved.
And then I think a lot of us are, as voters, I think the question here remains, I think I'm just going to echo what Prof. Shaza said. All we want is stability. Who's going to give me more stability? Who's going to raise my economic standing? Who's going to give me more sort of like, not to say Orang kata macam not to kena swap, what I say, more benefits, but how can I live in a Malaysia that I know I can retire well? I don't have to depend on like others.
Or we don't have to depend on handouts. Like
Yeah,
we want a Malaysia where we can thrive.
Yes.
Right?
Handouts.
Yeah, so no handouts, but thriving and in a place where stability, yeah, you're right. Because stability is something that we all want. And very few political parties or coalitions have shown us that stability.
Thank you so much again, Associate Professor Dr. Shazza Shukri, for joining us on this particular discussion.
Thank you so much for having me again.
I mean, it's always a pleasure to have you here, especially to exactly understand the opposition dynamics here, because again, I think I've not stressed this enough. I've stressed this a lot of times, but not enough. The opposition is our alternative when it comes to governance. So this is why we put so much attention in the discourse to understand what's happening on the other divide, right? Thank you so much, everybody. Now, if you do like this particular episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to also turn on the notification bell if you haven't already. You'll not only get Beyond the Headlines updates, other NSC Online's news reports will be delivered to you. Once again, thank you so much, Associate Professor Dr. Shazza Shukri.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Alina.
Thank you, and it's been a pleasure to listen to this and to have this conversation about politics. I enjoyed it.
Me too.
Oh yes, without
Without
crepe. Yes.
Later we will eat the keropok, okay? Because we can show but we cannot bite. Otherwise it will affect the sound.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So
Prof,
we're going to have a
silakan,
crepe party after this while discussing politics.
There's more.
And with that, follow us on our socials. We're everywhere: Facebook, Instagram, X, as well as TikTok. My name is Amalina Kamal, and we'll see you next week.